In the late 1960s, Beechcraft faced a familiar problem. Its Model 23 Musketeer had sold well as a solid, unremarkable trainer, but the light aircraft market was shifting. Piper had the Aero, Cessna had the Cardinal RG. Both offered pilots something the fixed-gear Musketeer could not: retractable landing gear, a constant-speed propeller, and the sense of flying something more serious than a first airplane. Beech needed an answer, and rather than design a new aircraft from scratch, the company did what aircraft manufacturers have always done when budgets and timelines are tight: it grew an existing one. The result arrived in 1970 as the Musketeer Super 3, soon renamed the Model 24, and eventually known simply as the Sierra. It borrowed the Musketeer's airframe and reputation for solid construction, then added the complexity newer pilots wanted to grow into. A 200-horsepower Lycoming IO360, retractable gear, and a constant-speed prop transformed a docile trainer into something that demanded attention on every approach.
What Beech did not do was chase speed. The Aero was quick. The Cardinal RG was sleek with a low wing and clean lines. The Sierra kept the Musketeer's high wing and boxy fuselage, a shape owners later called unglamorous, but honest. It was never going to win a beauty contest, and Beech seemed to know it. Instead, the company leaned into what it had always done well, building airplanes that felt substantial in a pilot's hands, with control response and systems that inspired confidence, even when the numbers on paper looked modest. This decision mattered. The early 1970s were flooded with pilots transitioning out of fixed-gear trainers, hungry for complex ratings but wary of machines that punish small mistakes. A retractable gear airplane with sharp handling could be unforgiving to someone new to the type. The Sierra offered a gentler bridge, wrapped in an airframe that behaved predictably even when a checklist item got missed. That first version, the A24, was fuel-injected from the outset and carried nearly 60 gallons of fuel, generous for the class. Its takeoff weight sat at 2,550 pounds in normal category, modest by later standards, but in keeping with a design built around approachability rather than payload records. Beech was not building a traveling machine in 1970, it was building a stepping stone, carefully and conservatively, with an eye toward the pilot sitting in the left seat for the first time in something that could bite back.
Numbers rarely flattered the Sierra. The C-24R, the definitive version that emerged by 1981, cruised at a maximum structural speed of 143 knots indicated and stalled clean at 65 knots. Respectable figures for a four-seat single, but they never approached what the Aero or Cardinal RG could deliver. Pilots who bought a Sierra expecting to outrun its rivals came away disappointed. Pilots who bought it for other reasons became owners for a very long time. What changed between the 1970 A24 and the 1981 C-24R tells the real story. The C-24R's gross weight climbed to 2,750 pounds, and useful load in normal category rose to just over 1,000 pounds, letting owners carry 4 adults and baggage without constantly consulting a weight and balance chart. Climb performance dipped slightly, from 950 feet per minute down to 862, a small trade for the heavier gross weight. Fuel burn at 75% power improved from roughly 12 gallons an hour down closer to 10, a change owners noticed every time they filed a fuel receipt.
None of these numbers were dramatic. That was rather the point. The Sierra's evolution across the 1970s was a slow accumulation of livability, not a chase for speed. More useful load meant real trips with real passengers. Better fuel economy meant lower operating costs for owners who kept their airplanes for decades. A slightly reduced climb rate was a small price for an airplane that could actually carry what its owners needed. This is where the Sierra's reputation quietly diverged from its rivals. Where the Aero and Cardinal RG earned admiration for outright performance, the Sierra earned something more durable: trust. Owners came to expect the airplane would do exactly what the panels said it would do, with few surprises. In an era when complex singles occasionally punished pilots for small oversights, an airplane that behaved predictably, even at the cost of a few knots, built a different kind of loyalty. If you have flown a Sierra or trained in one on your way toward a complex or high-performance endorsement, we would love to hear what you remember about it. If this kind of history speaks to you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the airplanes that shaped general aviation without ever making headlines. Ask anyone who has spent time around Beechcraft products, from the Bonanza down to the humblest Musketeer derivative, and a common thread emerges. The company built airplanes meant to last. Using construction methods and component quality, other manufacturers in the same price range did not match. The Sierra inherited that reputation directly, and it is arguably where it mattered most. Because the Sierra was rarely anyone's dream airplane, it was the airplane pilots flew on the way to something else. And how it treated them during that transition left a lasting impression. Flight schools valued the Sierra for exactly this reason. A pilot moving from a fixed-gear trainer into a complex rating needed an airplane that introduced retractable gear and a constant speed prop without introducing chaos alongside them. The Sierra's control harmony and forgiving stall characteristics meant instructors could focus on systems management rather than fighting the airframe itself. Landing gear horns, cowl flaps, prop pitch, mixture leaning, all of it had to become second nature before a pilot could call themselves ready for a faster, less forgiving complex single.
Owners discovered something flight students often missed. The same qualities that made the Sierra a good trainer made it a satisfying airplane to own for years afterward. It rarely surprised anyone. Maintenance costs stayed reasonable thanks to a simple, well-proven Lycoming engine and systems that avoided unnecessary complexity. Cabin comfort, often an afterthought in aircraft built to hit a speed number, was something Beech clearly prioritized. The Musketeer heritage gave the Sierra a wider cabin and a more forgiving ride than some sleeker competitors offered. It was not the fastest airplane in its class, and it never pretended otherwise. Aviation Consumer's own assessment of the type noted plainly that the Sierra was no speed demon, but that there was a lot to like about ownership all the same. That honest, unglamorous endorsement says something about how the Sierra earned its reputation. It did not win pilots over with performance claims. It won them over through years of unremarkable, reliable flying, the kind that builds quiet loyalty rather than headlines. Airplanes are remembered for different reasons. Some earn their place in aviation history through speed records or dramatic firsts. Others earn it more slowly, through decades of quiet, competent service that shaped thousands of pilots along the way. The Sierra belongs firmly in the second category, and that is why so many pilots who flew one still speak of it with fondness decades later. Consider what the Sierra actually accomplished. It took a generation of newly minted private pilots and walked them through their first experience with retractable gear and a constant speed propeller, without punishing the mistakes that come naturally during that learning curve. It did this while remaining comfortable, economical to operate, and durable enough that many examples from the 1970s and early 1980s are still flying reliably today, decades after flashier competitors from the same era have become rare. The used aircraft market still reflects this quiet endurance. Sierras remain attainable for pilots seeking a complex, retractable gear single without the costs of faster, more glamorous options. They are not sought after for bragging rights. They are sought after by pilots who understand exactly what the airplane offers: predictable handling, solid Beechcraft construction, and a cabin that makes longer trips pleasant rather than merely tolerable. Perhaps that is the legacy of the Sierra. In an industry that often measures success in knots and headlines, it succeeded by measuring itself differently. It became the airplane pilots trusted precisely because it never asked to be admired for anything more than what it was: solid, comfortable, and honest about its limitations. Decades later, that honesty is what pilots remember when the Sierra's name comes up, not with the excitement reserved for a record setter, but with the warmth reserved for an old, dependable friend that never once let them down. If you have a Sierra story of your own, whether from a training flight decades ago or a hangar you still visit today, share it with us below. And if you want more stories about the airplanes that quietly shaped general aviation, like, subscribe,
and join us for the next episode in this series.